When the Commission of Inquiry examined the situation in North Korea, as recounted to us by the witnesses in the public hearings and the huge amount of material that is now available, we found many grave violations of human rights. The imprisonment of large members of the population, particularly for alleged hostility to the regime, the inability to move about the country without the consent of the governmental officials, the grave food situation and the difficulty of people outside the elite to have access to the most basic food needs, the abduction issue, that's to say the seizure of people for use to the regime. It began in the time of the Korean War back in 1951-53 when large numbers of prisoners of war and others were seized and taken to the north for use in their economy, and it extended into the seizure of large numbers of Japanese nationals for use that was thought to be helpful to the regime. And all of these came together, and there were many more, in very serious crimes against humanity. Discrimination on the grounds of religion, discrimination against women, discrimination on the basis of class or perceived hostility to the regime. And not to put too fine a point on it, the regime in North Korea is a totalitarian regime, the like of which you cannot find anywhere else in the world today. For many years, the international community has been concerned about the human rights situation in North Korea, and in the end, I think they were just fed up. I suppose one of the triggering factors was that, as with all other countries that are members of the United Nations, North Korea is bound to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations of 1945, which commit the member states to the principles of universal human rights, and also bound to the principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and to a number of the human rights treaties which North Korea had signed. But when they went through their process of universal periodic review, which is now required of all member states of the United Nations, North Korea was the only country that refused to accept any recommendations of the Human Rights Council. Generally, countries accept many or some or a few, but of the 187 recommendations put to it by the Human Rights Council, North Korea didn't accept a single one. And I think that, plus the increasing stories of famine, starvation, and serious deprivations of human rights, led the Human Rights Council to resolve, actually without a vote. No vote was called for. Such was the strength of the conviction that something has to be done, to set up the Commission of Inquiry, and that was done in May 2013, and the members were appointed in May, June, and we commenced our work in July 2013, and we reported to the Human Rights Council in March 2014. Well, one comes away from an investigation such as this with mixed feelings. On the one hand, you realise very painfully that preparing a beautiful report with lots of evidence and conducting transparent procedures of public hearings and undertaking the whole big enterprise doesn't actually of itself improve the human rights of a single person in the country concerned, North Korea. And therefore there is a sense of frustration that You don't want this report to be just another human rights report gathering dust in the basement of the Palais Wilson, the headquarters of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. On the other hand, an inquiry such as we undertook in respect of North Korea does demonstrate that we have made progress. This is not a case where people can say, well, if only I had known how terrible the situation in North Korea was, we would have done something. Well, now nobody can say, if only I had known. Now, before the international community, before the member states, and before human beings everywhere in the planet is the report of the Commission of Inquiry. It's available online. It attracted an enormous amount of attention when it was delivered. We have to keep up the momentum to secure action in the General Assembly, the Security Council, and also in the other organs of the United Nations, in the Human Rights Council and the like. We've got to get action. A report is the beginning. It is an indication that we have made progress on human rights, but we've got to get action in order to make sure that the promise of universal human rights that exists in the Charter is fulfilled. The finding by the Commission of Inquiry of believable evidence that there were crimes against humanity committed on the part of the government, officers, military and political leadership of North Korea is not as itself a prosecutorial decision. We were not prosecutors, we were not judges, we were not a tribunal, not a court, but it is the beginning of a process that will secure accountability for the great wrongs that have been done over 40, 50 years to the citizens and other people in North Korea. The options were several. To set up a special tribunal, to create an ad hoc international tribunal, or a tribunal of Korean and international judges, as has been done in Cambodia, or to create a special prosecutor, but without designating the court concerned. The Commission of Inquiry concluded that the most efficient and available mechanism was the reference of the matter of North Korea and of our report and conclusions to the International Criminal Court. That court is established by the Rome Statute, and the Rome Statute provides that the ICC has jurisdiction in one of two circumstances, either because the country concerned has signed on to the treaty, the Rome Statute, or where exceptionally the Security Council refers the matter to the ICC, the International Criminal Court. Because North Korea is not a party to the Rome Statute, we concluded that the Security Council should refer the egregious crimes against humanity which we have found on the basis of our inquiry to the International Criminal Court. That therefore means that the matter will ultimately come before the Security Council in a formal session, and that will raise the question as to whether a majority can be secured, which includes the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, China and the Russian Federation. Now, when we had the ARIA procedure, which is the informal meeting of members of the Security Council, China and the Russian Federation absented themselves from that hearing. And that, it has been said, is an indication that they would ultimately wield the so-called veto against a decision by the Security Council in favour of referring the matter of North Korea to the ICC. I'm not so sure that one can write off this procedure. The international situation in North Korea is a matter of legitimate concern to all countries, particularly of the region. The Russian Federation and China have common borders with North Korea. North Korea has the largest standing army, the fourth largest standing army in the world, and certainly the largest standing army for a country of its population size, which is about the same population as Australia. And all of this suggests that something will occur. There is before the Security Council already a resolution on peace and security in North Korea and on the nuclear issue, and all that would be required would be that that resolution should be enlarged in order to permit the wider questions of human rights to come under the aegis of the Security Council, with the possibility of a reference to the ICC. And I am hopeful that that should happen. In all truth, if there is justice in our world and true concern about endemic and grave human rights, as revealed by the report of the Commission of Inquiry, the Security Council will do its duty.